Oh, she's talking.
Hi. Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for accompanying us in this dialogue.
Yeah, hi. Thanks. Thanks for doing that.
And I mean, it's such a wonderful situation in which we can actually talk a little bit more at length about your film. And actually, I made these notes. I hope you don't mind that I wrote literally the trouble with being born or the power of implication, because there are so many things that I believe are really powerful in the way that you have constructed this film. So just as a by way of contextualization, would you like, I mean, I would like to sort of tackle the situation about how the script came along, because I have read some of your statements. I know that this is a script that it did in cooperation with Roderick Warwick. Um, and I'm very interested in the elements that sort of came together for you to collaborate.
Um, I was writing on a different story and I was searching for a non-human angle, like a non-human perspective, but I couldn't get out of it because I didn't think of the obvious. And Roderick Warich is a good friend, and he is was already working together with my DOP, who is also my partner and who is a director himself. And they work together on his film, Zerrumpelt Herz. And we always have been bouncing around ideas. And one day, Roderick just said, "Oh, you could do this film about this child android, in this setting with this man, like having this relationship." And I immediately was intrigued by the idea. Like, first it sounded like very, okay, oh my God, that's like a clickbait headline. Uh, but could there be something to that? And I figured quite early, oh, that there would be something to that, where I could find this perspective that I actually was searching for. And so we started to talk, and some of the elements I already had in my other story organically came into this one, like the Froschikova, the old lady in the second part of the film, and some ideas of how to look at the world suddenly made sense for me. And so we started to write, and basically our writing process was more or less we walked and walked around the block in Berlin, Neukölln, and would talk, and then I would go home and write again. And yeah, running around in loops, listening to music, and just talking was the very start, the very boring start of the script.
Like, I'm very captivated by the fact that in one of the interviews you also state like this hesitance, like, did I dare do it? Because it involves this visual element that is very striking at a very clearly young girl, Ellie, and then becoming into this other iteration of the robot. And I would like to, sort of tackle that with you and run that by you, because I understand the hesitance, but I
Yeah.
also understand this other part that you put forward about the robot being a vessel for memory. So could you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is my second feature. It's my graduation film from Film Academy, and I did a feature film before that was staged in the 50s in Austria, and it's a story of a girl inheriting a camera by her dad and starting to film her family, and basically nothing is happening. And the film was very much a trial to visualize something becoming a memory. And I realized that in between this overlap of memory and imagination and further programming, that there was something that I could very much work again on through this vessel of the android, and that I found so fascinating. And this is what the android for me, in a way, also stood for then. Of course, it was quite of a process to to come from the moment, from the very first idea, to have, okay, having this film of a child android that could be programmed to do anything, whatever its owners want, to really film it and to edit it is like a long way, you know, in the way of that you also have to bend your thoughts of how could you actually shoot that, you know, how could you shoot the relationship between the man and this childlike android, and how are we going to work with an actress. And I think it was very clear from the very beginning that it should be a childlike android, and it actually needs to be played by a child. But it took me a while to really figure that out and to really step into that, you know, how can we do that, and how are we going to work with an actress so young on set with topics such as a dangerous sexual relationship between two old men and a young child, and other subjects like death and loss and grief. And yeah, but because I think we and my team thought so long about it, and we were prepared so much until I finally decided that we are going to look for a child. We figured that there was no danger at all, because everything that came into there, every context, everything not child appropriate came in there in the editing, you know. So everything, the film we shot and the film that came out there is a complete different story. And the hardest part was maybe to really explain to a girl in a child appropriate way, of course, what this film is going to be and what it is about. But there we were pretty lucky to have found our great young talent, Lena Watson, and her parents also. Yeah, it was a long process. I mean, you know, it's so weird to bring it down then afterwards and talking about it, and everything seems so clear like now. But yeah, back then it was a long way.
I can imagine. I mean, I believe like there is something so incredibly fascinating about I mean, you bring up the editing, and I think that a lot of this particular sort of tension, like your DOP, is it Tim Kruger, right?
Yeah.
Like I kept going back when I was watching these, like let's say the finished product put together, and the visual tension between all of these incredibly crisp, incredibly intimate scenarios that are just by power of that suggestion. And I can imagine that, I mean, that was of course shot in a certain context and explained to the actress, and then put together. But what was the most difficult part of, it's difficult to put into words. You see, when I watched the film, I was thinking so much about how very well timed and very well crafted all these tensions are, because nothing of it is more than suggestion. Yeah. Nothing, like especially these interactions that are inappropriate between this man that is sort of reconfiguring this idea of his long lost daughter. What was the most challenging bit of that post-production process? Because it must have been quite a tension between that balance of explicitness, but explicit enough so it remains at the level of suggestion.
I mean, the scenes itself, you know, they were planned like that and written like that, and so we knew how explicit we are going to be, we're going to be. But in the editing, I changed her voice, for example. So the actress was dubbed afterwards with another actress. So also I could free myself from thinking about, the girl being there, but having an actress. And also, so I also created complete different sentences. Sometimes the scene was the same. And the scene was already the same, but it was in a different context. So we shot it in a complete different context that was much more childlike and playful in a way than what we did. But adding that was just something that needed another tone in the voice, you know? So it was planned to be like that, but you chose a different mood for the shooting. And then I chose a different mood that I needed in the editing afterwards. So to create this tension and this everything, all of that, all the unsettling things you see there, that was something that was planned beforehand. But for me, the most challenging part in the whole editing process was really to put this film together in the real way, because I always had a feeling that the script, the script we had written, where we got the fundings, was not quite the right thing to show the perspective of this machine, of this android, because I always had a feeling I'm missing something, you know. I'm missing an angle and perspective that I might find during the process. And I realized all during the shooting that the camera alone cannot be responsible for this perspective. That maybe the narration must be much more, how do you say, must be much more told from the perspective of an android, and that there must be breaks in there and fragile things in the narration, you know, that the whole thing feels more like an android stream. So that was the biggest part, to put together the whole structure again afterwards. Did you understand me? Because it's something hard to explain.
No, actually, I want to pick up from something that you mentioned, because I find it fascinating that a lot of this, I mean, of course, it must have been already configured in this really abstract form, and then putting it together to sort of bring that disconnect. Because I kept thinking, when you were telling me just about these extra elements that sort of came into the mix later on, putting everything together, and to somewhat decontextualize a part that it seemed to work at some point, and then invest it with a different meaning. And when you bring this, and I would like to go back to this, because I find it fascinating. It is quite let's say it's unusual to find this perspective that is told from the point of view of an android, specifically because we understand them to be, as you have also mentioned in other interviews, objects. They do not have the same ontology as a human being. And for me, that was perhaps sort of like the most haunting part when I was watching the film, thinking about all the associations that come with listening to a child talk, and then realizing it's actually a vessel for somebody else's desires and somebody else's memories and somebody else's way of being tethered to reality.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think, what was the most challenging part? Because I know now that you mentioned a little bit of these explorations that you had already established with the impossible picture a little bit before, this impossibility of grasping memory or grasping something that is so fleeting. So I'm really interested in this bit that sort of motivates you and prompts you to do this exploration from the side of the android.
I mean, yeah, I think that, you know, this time the process, I needed the whole process. I needed really the whole time. Like the writing, everything happened very quickly. The idea, then we had the script finished after a year, I think, and then we already started to shoot, and we had the money and the funding that up. And I really had this time the feeling that only in the editing I do have the time to, in a way, breathe again and like sit down and rethink everything that we put in there, and let everything, you know, let the material itself speak. I mean, it always sounds so esoterical. I'm not even that esoterical in my real life, but I do have the feeling, in the sense of filmmaking and in the sense of how material works and what you find there, that you need some time to really step back and be also surprised by what you maybe found, you know. I do love to create those things, but I do love also to find something within there that I could not maybe think of, or that I hoped to find. So yeah, it was really, I mean, I wrote pages full of theoretical thoughts on how this android looks at the world, and how this could be, and in a technical way, how could the camera move? What's this entity looking at the film? Where does it come from? Is it the inner or the outer point? And until I realized in the editing, finally, something I felt before, that the same point, that it's coming from inside and outside at the same point, being a virtual entity, you know. So yeah, it was really a long way, but then, you know, there it really came together.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm thinking about two things in particular that I would like to hold on from what you're telling me. And one, I keep thinking about, yeah, the implication of the android as an object, especially in these scenes, in these instances that are very uncomfortable to regard, because there are instances of intimacy and played out, of course, with a child. They are very inappropriate, and the viewer, at least, you know, the viewer, myself in that position, situations in which you cannot help but feel that there's some sort of association with the humanity of this android, and then realize that it's in reality an object. It's an excuse for somebody else to configure whatever tethers them to reality, to loss, to their grief or their memories. So I had like a lot of notes that kept repeating like uncanny, because it is, I mean, it is an uncanny sight. But at the same time, it was very interesting to see this disconnect, and it's something that I believe comes up in a very practical level, as you mentioned, the camera and its coldness sort of regarding something that could invite unease. And I keep being, you know, when you mention this, I keep going back to these like grazing movements over, you know, over the android, or this display when the android is like sitting on a table and disassembled. That to me was incredibly, you know, like, it was very uncomfortable. So, and I mean, and I think it sort of prompts us to these questions that you keep rising up about the humanity behind memory. And I would like to know a little bit more about that, because I find this conversation fascinating, and I've read you like interviewed by someone else actually about this. So I would like to know more about that.
But more about what exactly? What do you mean? Because
what was the difficulty to also, you know, to keep that tension between humanizing the robot, because one cannot help to do that.
But I think that the main that was to humanize it was not the problem, because you see this android and you see the girl playing it, and you definitely, I mean, you have empathy for her from the first second, and you anthropomorphize her from the first second. So it was harder to fall back to the object. I mean, this needed more work, of course, than everything else, because we worked with the silicone mask on set, which was very important for this uncanny too straighten face, you know, to direct weird look without any mimics. But to really bring it back and down to being an object, that was technically the harder part, you know, to have these moments again where we now could really, that's why there are those scenes that are, I mean, it's the one scene that's the most explicit scene, where we, on the one side, realize what's the real relationship between this man and this android, and on the other hand, realize that it's an object because he can change parts of her. So this was actually the more difficult thing, was to bring her really down to this object.
Yeah, I suppose that was sort of like the question that kept brewing in my head, like, how to do this. And I sort of go back to this moment where her skin rips a little bit. And the sensation of fixing an appliance, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, exactly, fixing like a mobile phone or whatever, like something you have there, as if it would happen every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's perhaps one of the most captivating parts for me personally watching the film, because it enables that sort of ambiguity. At every turn, we are reminded that she is not a sentient being.
Yeah, I mean, that was the core idea to, but also the idea was to have her as you know, as natural as she was as an actress, and not to, because we worked with a movement coordinator and we tried out several things that looked more technical in a way, you know, more like a machine. But I realized also quickly there that actually I would like to have those moments where we fall back to this android being an object are the rare moments, whether the other moments where we would humanize, anthropomorphize her would be most of the time the case, you know. So, but yeah, that was also, of course, an interesting process. How are we gonna show her, and how are we going to? How much does she have to resemble our human nature? That was which is also one of the core questions of the whole film, of course, itself. How much does an object has to resemble ourselves, so we apply the same moral standards to it, you know? So it's, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that particular core question, I think it's what I find the most fascinating of all, because I kept thinking about these. How is it that you wrote the characters that were not the droid, that were this man and this woman who are actually investing all these affects in an object? And I kept trying to find, as a viewer, of course, some sort of anchorage or some sort of sympathy for them. And while I can understand that it's this incommensurable grief that prompts them to act, you, like, your script and the direction does not leave that sort of, I think it leaves the question in the air. How is it that we're applying those sorts of, trying to find anchorage, you know, to put our affect whether on them or the droid?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel sympathy for both of them, you know, in a way. And also we tried to, like in the editing, tried to work also with the character of the man, like to feel sympathy for him, like in the editing from this point of view. That was sometimes hard, you know, I mean, considering what's the story. But yeah, and I always had a feeling that they are like, how do you say, like Schablonen, you know, they are also, I always had a feeling they also could be just some parts of her, of its virtual world, you know, that they are the ghosts. That's why they never felt so real, I understood at one point, you know, that because they feel to me like I don't know the word, like Schablonen, like a pattern, you know, not like a real person. Sometimes there are moments where I do have the feeling, oh, they are real persons, but most of the time I do have the feeling they are more also like entities and just like very yeah, like ghosts, you know. That's what I realized during the process also of the shooting. I did not realize that in the beginning in the writing, but during the shooting I again had the feeling, okay, it's even more about a story of ghosts than about anything else. So that's why, I mean, the whole process, which was quite short time, was really important to find out what's the core of those characters.
And I'm so glad that this comes up, because it sort of sheds light on a lot of these things that had been running in my head when I was watching this film. I find this film to be, for lack of a better term, very haunting. And this thing that you describe about this, it's this feeling of like many hauntings coming together, whether the man and the woman that are investing their affects in the droid, or the droid itself unable to create any memories. And I would like to return, if I may, to this other part of what was your experience when you finally watched it. You mentioned that there's always this element of discovery, seeing this assemblage all together. What was your initial reflection?
Yeah, I mean, the discovery did not come after I finished the film. The discovery was all, as you mean, you know, it's not something you realize then after you saw it in you saw the whole film. It's something that comes from the very first day or very first moment of making the film. And I'm just open for these, you know, for for these elements to change, because I find it interesting. And for example, one thing I did not realize in the very beginning was that I had the feeling that basically all of those characters that are in there are like ghosts, you know, and are really like, as I said, this was not in the writing process. They just were normal people, you know, but figuring that out. But this has really something to do with my way of working. And I think I studied the documentary filmmaking. So I really like to be surprised at some points. I do love the creation too much. That's why I always go to fiction again, you know. But I have the feeling that in the whole process of you go there and you write a script and you have a very first moment, which is maybe not an idea yet, maybe not a picture yet, and you translate it into a sentence. You learn, you get a lot and you earn a lot new stuff, putting it out in a sentence, and you translate it and everyone can read it then. But you also lose something. And I always have the feeling that the whole process of the writing, of the preparation, of the shooting, and then of everything coming together back again in the editing is in a way to find again these moments, you know, that you had in the very first inspirational moment, second, whatever it was. So this is something what I really love about it, because it's not just the word, it's not just the script. You can plan it. Of course you can plan it. And of course it's interesting if you write a scene and you shoot it exactly like that. It's interesting. It's just, you know, I have the feeling to get really to the core of what was it that you actually had in mind and figured it out. You need the whole process, and that's what I love so much about that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no doubt that the film continues to have many ripples. I can tell you, like personally, after watching it, it was haunting me and sort of prompting all these questions in my head, which I think is just a testament to how incredibly complex the film is, and how interesting it is that it has grown for you as well as its maker, so to say, or part of this team of makers responsible for making it come true. So I'm really looking forward to know how it is received in other circuits, and to hear more about you maybe in the future about what you have learned and how much that of this has accrued new experiences on the lens of time.
Yeah, and if like, do you want to continue like that? You know, I mean, one can. Right now, I just think it's the most interesting way to work on it personally. But it has also to do, I mean, you know, I personally love a lot of different genres or films, and but I think one power of cinema is really, in a way, something we can compare and maybe only find in our dreams or in music, you know, something that's not as linear as every other perception we have, as every other observing point we have. And therefore, to maybe create something like that, maybe this process, as how I described it, is necessary. I mean, maybe not, you know, I'm not sure. I just like it. I like to be surprised also within the creation.
Mm-hmm. No, but I mean, I think it's very successful in this attempt at returning the pre-consciousness. I really like this term that sort of came up in your description of the film at some other point. This capability of trying to grasp something that is just as fleeting as the nature of image or memory or affect at all.
Yeah, something before the word, you know, pre-verbal also in a way. Even though I love the word and I believe in words, so to say, and I do believe, not like a post-structuralist, I do believe that there is a table, even though I don't give it a name, but I do have the feeling that words have a big power, but they are also tricky, and so it's interesting to look behind them.
Yeah, they're tickly, and they can be a little bit stifling. So I think
exactly.
I think that you have succeeded very well in sort of prompting that conversation, and I'm very confident that this will invite a lot of philosophical conversations as well. Yes. So thank you so much, Sandra. This has been I know that I could keep talking to you for a much longer time, but thank you so much for your fascinating answers, and also for this incredible commitment and passion that you transmit about this film.
Well, thank you for chatting with me about that. What are you up to now?
Well, I think up to now, I think I will just be reflecting and mulling on the film a little bit more after I've gotten your answers. So it's been a pleasure, and also such a joy to actually pick your brain a little bit about this.
Yeah, it's always weird to talk about something like, I mean, I think that a lot of filmmakers would describe that as well, that you're working on something for like several years, and you really try to form that thought into a 90 minutes thing, and it takes several years. And then afterwards you're talking about it, and everything you say can just, in a way, break it, because it needed such a long time to bring it out there. And then every description kind of feels wrong.
No, I completely understand. I mean, all proportions saved, but I'm working on a doctoral thesis, so I feel in a very similar way.
Oh my God, yeah, I can imagine.
But this has been such a wonderful, I mean, it's been really illuminating. And I think that a lot of it just really comes through on how it has a philosophical foundation to it.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate that you have sort of expanded on that, because a lot of it, and the nature of yeah, this sounds like clickbaity, but as a matter of fact, it has so much more philosophically to offer. So I really appreciate that you have gone deeper into that part.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's a click, and you can very easily reduce the film to a clickbait headline, which also already happened in some countries. And that's okay, because I mean, we knew that this film and this whole setting will be a provocation at some point, either for a thought or for emotion or whatever. So it was not that we ran in there blindly, but it was really a choice to do so and to actually raise exactly those questions.
Yeah, so I think it's going to prompt a lot of them, guaranteed. But I mean, I really appreciate you sharing your vision. I think I might, if that's okay, we can cut this here now. I'm sure that there we are. So thank you so much for joining us for this interview and for this screening.
Well, thank you for
being born, and best of luck in all your future projects. I'm really looking forward to seeing more of you.
Thank you so much. Maybe one day in persona we can meet at some festival.
That would be lovely once this is once this is over. But let me see.